Hello and welcome back. This is an English listening practice for intermediate learners. If you already understand basic English but want to sound more natural and confident, you are in the right place. In this episode, you don't need to repeat after me. You don't need to stop the video. Just listen carefully and let English flow naturally. Let's begin with daily life. Many people describe their days as busy, but native speakers often use more specific words. For example, instead of saying, "I am very busy," they might say, "I've had a long day," or "It's been a busy one." Listen to this sentence. It's been a long day, and I'm feeling tired. This sentence sounds natural and realistic. Now let's talk about routines. People often say, "I wake up early," but English speakers also say, "I'm an early riser." An early riser is someone who wakes up early easily. For example, I'm an early riser, so mornings are my favorite time of day. On the other hand, someone might say, "I'm not a morning person." This means mornings are difficult for them. Now, listen carefully. I'm not a morning person, so I need time to wake up. Let's move on to habits. Instead of saying "I do this often," English speakers say, "I usually do this," or "I tend to do this." For example, I usually listen to English podcasts while walking. I tend to feel more focused in the evening. The phrase "tend to" is very common and very natural. Now, let's talk about feelings. Sometimes people feel stressed, but they don't always say, "I am stressed." They might say, "I feel overwhelmed." Overwhelmed means you feel like there is too much to do. For example, I feel overwhelmed when I have too many tasks. Another common word is relieved. Relieved means you feel better after stress is gone. For example, I felt relieved after finishing my work. Now, listen to this sentence. At first, I felt overwhelmed, but later I felt relieved. This kind of sentence is very common in real English. Let's continue. When people talk about progress, they often say, "I'm getting better." This shows improvement over time. For example, "I'm getting better at understanding spoken English." They might also say, "I still have a lot to learn." This shows honesty and motivation. Now, let's talk about opinions. Instead of always saying, "I think," English speakers often say, "In my opinion," "From my point of view," or "As far as I'm concerned." For example, "In my opinion, listening every day is the best way to improve." These phrases help you sound more fluent and natural. Now, let's slow down a bit. You don't need to understand every word you hear. Understanding the main idea is enough. English speakers do this too. They don't focus on every single word. Now, let's look at a very common expression. It depends. This phrase is used all the time. For example, "Is learning English difficult?" It depends. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Now, another useful expression. "I'm not sure this is polite and honest." For example, "I'm not sure if I have time today." You might also hear, "I'll get back to you." This means you will answer later. Now, let's talk about social situations. When someone suggests an idea, you might hear, "That sounds good," "That sounds interesting." If you are unsure, you can say, I'm not sure about that. This sounds polite and natural. Now listen carefully. I'm not sure about that, but I'm open to trying. Very natural English. Let's continue with time expressions. Instead of saying now, English speakers often say at the moment. For example, at the moment, I'm focusing on my listening skills. Another common word is lately. For example, lately, I've been listening to English more often. You don't need to understand the grammar perfectly, just notice how it sounds. Now, let's pause here. Take a breath, relax. You are doing well. This is the end of part 1. In the next part, we will talk about confidence, mistakes, communication, and thinking in English. Stay with me. Let's continue with confidence and real communication because this is where many learners feel stuck. You might understand a lot of English, but still feel uncomfortable when you need to react quickly, and this is completely normal. English speakers often say it takes time, and this is not just a simple sentence, it's a reality of learning any language. When you listen regularly, your brain slowly starts to recognize patterns, sounds, and common expressions, even if you don't notice it at first. Many learners think they are not improving because they still miss words. But in fact, understanding the general meaning is already a big step forward. A very common expression you will hear is "I'm getting there," which means you are not perfect yet, but you are making progress. For example, someone might say, "My English isn't perfect, but I'm getting there," and this sounds very natural and honest. Another useful phrase is, "I still struggle with this," which means something is difficult, but you haven't given up. English speakers use the word struggle often, especially when talking about learning or personal challenges. Now, let's talk about mistakes, because mistakes are a big part of real communication. Instead of saying "I made a mistake," people often say "I messed up," which sounds more informal and natural. For example, "I messed up the pronunciation, but that's okay." You might also hear "it happens," which means mistakes are normal and not a big problem. When someone apologizes, a very common response is "no worries," which means everything is fine. This phrase is used a lot in daily conversations. Another expression you will hear is "take your time," and this means there is no pressure and no need to hurry. When you are learning English, this phrase is very important to remember. Now let's move to thinking in English, which many learners want to do but feel is difficult. English speakers don't translate in their heads all the time. They focus on meaning, not perfect sentences. A very useful expression related to this is "it feels more natural now," which shows progress over time. For example, at first listening was hard, but now it feels more natural. You might also hear people say, "I'm more comfortable with it," which means they feel less nervous than before. Comfort is a key word when learning a language. Another common phrase is "I'm not there yet," which means you still need more practice, but you are aware of your progress. Now, let's talk about real-life reactions. When something is surprising, people often say "that's interesting" or "that's unexpected." When something is difficult, they might say "that's challenging" instead of just "that's hard." These small word choices make English sound more natural and advanced. In conversations, you will often hear fillers like actually, honestly, or to be fair, and these words help speakers sound more thoughtful and natural. For example, honestly, I didn't expect it to be this difficult, or to be fair. Learning a language takes effort. Now, let's slow down again and reflect for a moment. You don't need to understand everything perfectly to communicate effectively. Even native speakers sometimes misunderstand each other, ask people to repeat, or change their sentences halfway. This is normal communication, not failure. A very useful sentence to remember is, "Could you say that again?" because it sounds polite and confident at the same time. Another natural sentence is, "I didn't quite catch that," which means you didn't hear or understand something clearly. Using these expressions helps you stay in the conversation instead of stopping completely. As we come closer to the end of this part, remember that listening is not passive. Your brain is always working in the background. Even when you feel tired or distracted, something is happening. Progress in listening often appears suddenly, when one day you realize you understand more than before. This is why consistency matters more than speed. Little by little, your understanding becomes stronger, your reactions become faster, and English starts to feel less like a foreign language and more like a familiar sound. As we move into the final part, let's focus on motivation and long-term progress. Because learning English is not about one good day or one bad day. It's about what you do consistently over time. Many learners stop because they feel stuck, but feeling stuck often means you are actually in the middle of improvement. English speakers often say progress isn't always visible, and this is especially true for listening skills. You may not notice small changes, but they add up. A very common and natural expression is, "I've come a long way," which means you are better than before, even if you are not where you want to be yet. For example, "I still make mistakes, but I've come a long way." Another useful phrase is, "There's room for improvement," which means you can still get better without criticizing yourself. English speakers use this phrase in a positive way, especially at work or when learning something new. Now, let's talk about confidence again, because confidence grows quietly. You don't suddenly wake up fluent. Instead, one day you realize you understand jokes, opinions, or emotions in English, and that's a big sign of progress. A natural sentence you might hear is, "I feel more confident than before," and this simple comparison shows growth. You might also hear, "I'm starting to feel comfortable expressing myself," which means you are not afraid to try any more. This is an important stage in language learning. Now, think about your own experience while listening to this podcast. Maybe some parts felt easy and some parts felt challenging. Both are good signs. Easy parts show what you already know, and challenging parts show where growth is happening. A very helpful mindset is remembering that understanding comes before speaking, and listening prepares your brain for real communication. English speakers don't plan every sentence in advance. They react, adjust, and continue, and you can do the same. As we finish, remember this: You don't need perfect pronunciation, perfect grammar, or perfect vocabulary to communicate effectively. What matters is clarity, confidence, and the willingness to keep going. Listening regularly builds all of these naturally. Thank you for spending this time listening and learning. Come back whenever you want to practice again, and trust that even when it feels slow, your English is moving forward. See you next time.